weather today and the Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. As always, please send in your pictures as quickly as you
Pictures?
can. I mean, not pictures, your questions. Sorry. I feel like Mr. Rogers. I'm actually taking my shoes off right now. So I should put on my cardigan and sing a little song
I'm
like
having
Mr.
a little
Rogers.
snack for a Thanksgiving
So,
present from a church member.
yeah, that's fun. So, anyway, that's why I'm talking crazy. Send in your questions, and as soon as possible, we'll be able to then know what they are and discuss them, chat about them together. So, Chill, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I missed being at the services this morning.
Yeah.
I want to encourage everybody to be there if you can be, because it is different.
Hmm. You had been in person now for how many weeks in a row?
I don't know.
A couple of months, maybe.
Yeah, a couple of months. And today, Edmund and Eva weren't feeling. Yesterday they weren't feeling 100%, so I thought we better stay home just to be safe, because we couldn't pass the checklist. So, but yeah.
Which is good to be safe.
Yeah, but it's not quite the same as getting to be there and worship together in person, if you're able to do so.
Yeah. If you didn't catch Carmen's in the children's ministry's devotion before the live stream, it happens at 8:45 and at 10:45, so 15 minutes before each
It was so
session.
good.
It's so well done.
Did you watch it?
I'd watched the second one. I wasn't able to watch the first one, but
we watched the first one.
Yeah, it was so delightful. So just a great job. So highly encourage you, if you're not taking advantage of that, it's a great opportunity to just disciple your kids. You get to be with them. We've said all along that it's not the church's job to teach your children the way of the Lord, right? It's the parents' job to do that, and the church is coming alongside to help and equip you for that. And so that's exactly what this is getting a chance to do, is we get to share a devotion with the kids or with the young people, but you're there present with them if you're on a live stream, and you get to maybe take it in and process it and talk about it together. So hopefully that'll be a blessing to you. Also, if you are able, we'd love to see you live in person, as Cho was saying. It's just something special. I was thinking about that today. I even said something to the congregation. There's just some special encouragement. Well, I mean, it's church, right? It's actual church where we assemble together to sing and preach and listen to God's word and pray together, and it's a special opportunity. So if you're able to be in person, we would love to have you at the 9 or 11 a.m. It's just a great opportunity. So, any questions?
No
Okay.
questions.
Well, why don't you lead off? Any thoughts from today's message? Did you get a chance to concentrate? Or was Eva,
No, yeah, she always does better in the services than at home, of course, because at home is a more comfortable environment.
Yeah.
And the training is not maybe in place as much as it is when we're in the worship service. But yeah, we all paid attention.
Good.
I don't have any observations necessarily.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess one thing to continue just thinking about is the whole idea of idolatry, because it creeps in so easily into our hearts. And so you see it sort of blatantly in Haman's situation, where he has everything the world has to offer, in a sense. He's number 2 man in the greatest kingdom that the world has ever known, and he's still miserable because one person won't do reverence to him. So it just kind of reminds you of, that's sort of an extreme version perhaps, but it just reminds you of the heart idols we can all have very easily. And so, as we said today, one of the ways to sort of reveal to yourself, as in self-examination, the idols of your heart, is just to ask yourself, what brings me overwhelming joy? So if you're discouraged or you're sad, if you're down, if you're worried about the future, if you're feeling guilty about the past, whatever, what brings you joy? Is it just escaping from that to go do something fun? Or is it concentrating on something else, like, okay, well, I've made this mistake in the past, but in the future I'm going to succeed. And so you focus on something that you're going to accomplish. Is that what brings you joy, or is it running to Jesus and finding your security and identity in Him? Flip side of that is a great way to find your idols of your heart is by what makes you miserable. And that is, I think, that's the way God often points out my idols to be, is He just knows exactly where to put His finger. Where you're like, oh no, I think I'm pretty good over there, God. I don't have any idols. And then He puts His finger right on something and it hurts really bad. And you realize, ooh, I love that thing more than I realized I loved that thing.
Yeah.
So whether it's Him taking it away or just threatening it or just exposing it in some way or another, just allowing you to be miserable reminds you, wait a second, I shouldn't be this miserable. If I am trusting in Jesus, and He says in the world you'll have tribulations, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. So if that's the spirit I'm taking, if I'm in Christ, I can go through difficulties, and He promises I will. In this world you will have tribulations, but He also says be of good cheer. And if I'm not experiencing that, then it probably means my idol is somewhere.
Yeah. I think one thing that's important to consider when thinking of this issue of idols as a Christian is what makes me miserable may not be quite as extreme as Haman, like you were saying, but it may actually be a good thing. So
not spiking somebody to death. But
right. I'm trying to think of something that can be good, like family time,
Family
or
was
whatever.
one of his.
Just
So, yeah. He's getting out his, showing it, bragging about all his sons and all how many sons he has and all that. Yeah, family.
Yeah, but the thing that was making him miserable was
right, yeah.
the not getting the praise and the recognition and the respect. But it can just be not getting to have Sundays off of work, which is in itself a good thing and an honorable thing to ask the Lord for. But if you're in a situation where you can't do that, it's important to keep in submission to His will, or just keep your priorities straight, because sometimes it's not always like, sometimes it is. There have been many times in my life where it's like a horrible just sin that I have allowed that's making me miserable. But sometimes it's just that it's slightly off. You've taken a good thing and you've let it just creep up over the very best thing, which is Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
So, and I think as Christians, hopefully, if we're growing in our sanctification, it's more of the good things taking place, sort of supplanting Christ in where He should be in our priorities, rather than some dreadful, horrible thing, although it is sometimes that. Anyway, just in case somebody's watching and they're thinking, I can't identify with
Haman.
Haman.
Yeah.
It's good to know that there probably is something in
Yeah.
which you could identify with.
Yeah. Maybe you don't want to kill the person who gets in your way, but maybe you're just a little jealous of them, or maybe you are just too attached to them. It can be the opposite thing.
Yeah.
Just this week I was struck by the passage where Jesus says that we are to lay up treasures in heaven where moth and rust can't corrupt and thieves can't steal. And instead of laying up treasures on earth where moth and rust do corrupt. And I was just thinking about how hard that is, how incredibly hard that is, because it's so hard.
Because we're living here.
Yeah, we live here. This is what we touch. This is what we feel.
Right.
This is what we value. This is what everybody else around us
Hard to keep
values.
an eternal perspective.
Yeah, it's what everybody around you values, and in some sense, especially in Western society, I think it's easy also to think, if you're, for instance, if you're not climbing the ladder of sort of financial success or something like that, then in the West you usually have opportunities, and if you take advantage of your opportunities, then you can sort of make a little more money, make yourself a little better situation. And so it sometimes even feels, this is the striking thing, it feels irresponsible sometimes to put treasures in heaven instead of laying up treasures on earth, which is funny, but that's exactly what Jesus says. He says, moth and rust corrupt over here, they don't corrupt over there. That's the most responsible thing you can do. It's so hard to think that way, though.
Yeah, but sometimes you're called to sacrifice an earthly, what would be an earthly treasure, or maybe you want to call it stability here on earth,
Yeah.
in order to pursue an eternal treasure. It's not always the case, but
it's almost always the case that some kind of sacrifice is going to be
but
required. Yeah.
some to more degrees than other.
Yeah, that's true.
So
But here's the thing: is Jesus doesn't just require us to be willing to sacrifice. That's what was striking to me in the command. He actually is telling us to consciously make this decision to lay up treasures in heaven.
yeah.
So it's not just when God requires it of you, allow Him to take your idols
right,
away,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not correcting anything you said. I'm just saying this is what was striking to me this week is how hard it is to actually make that decision, to actually consciously say, okay, I'm going to invest in spiritual things. I'm going to invest in heaven things, not investing in earth, which will require not investing in earthly things. It's hard to do that. It's
Yes.
not just when it happens and you have to do it and you struggle with it and so on.
Right.
But to actually make that decision, that's hard.
Yeah, and then to die to self day after day after day
Good point.
when it's brought to your mind
Yeah.
again
Good
and again and
point.
again. Wow, I'm not doing this, or
Yeah.
my car is getting old, or whatever the
Yeah.
thing is. I can't think of anything,
Yeah.
but we've got a question.
Yeah, sure.
So there are many similarities in the book of Daniel and Esther. In both books, it could be said that the decree couldn't be changed according to the law of Medes and Persians. Daniel 9:1 says, Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, could he be the same Ahasuerus in the book of Esther?
Oh man, I'd have to go back and do a little history study there to see exactly what the relationships are. Yeah, I wouldn't try to answer that without looking at it first. Yeah, a great place to get that kind of information is either if you have a study Bible, like an ESV study Bible, or the NIV study Bible is really good. The Reformation Study Bible. These are all really good resources that give you like an outline at the beginning of each book, and also sort of sum up some of the major themes and people and their history and so on. Find a resource to use. Even if you don't have a book or a software, Bible study software, or anything like that, is you can just go online. And there's BibleStudyTools.com, I think it is, or .org, BibleStudy.org. These are really good places where you can find lots of free commentaries, and Matthew Henry is one of my favorite that's free, available almost everywhere online. And just go to the Book of Esther and kind of, there's always, again, in the commentary, there's always an introductory thing that kind of gives background information for the book that kind of says, this is the setting, these are the main players, and so on, and kind of helps you link, okay, for me, that's always the minor prophets. I'm always like, wait, when did this minor prophet live, and when did they minister, and who else was prophesying at the same time? And so it's really helpful to get that kind of information just to refresh yourself when you're reading through a book, or if you're trying to study it or study the characters in the book. That's very helpful. So BibleStudy.org has you can look up Esther and find lots of good commentaries, or a study Bible is very, very easy, simple way.
It does say Xerxes was the son of Darius.
Very good. Yeah, I mean that makes sense, right? I just wouldn't. I didn't want to say for sure because I think. Well, anyway, I sometimes I can get my history confused, so I'd have to look at it specifically beforehand before just making something up for sure. Great question. Just to let you know, it's not at all as if I'm not a historian. I guess everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. Definitely one of my weaknesses, geography is one. Like when I'm reading the New Testament or Old Testament, either one, and it's saying they went from this city to this city and did this. I never really get a clear picture in my mind where are all these places. Even when I look it up, it's always a little challenging for me. I don't know. Geography is one of my challenging areas of understanding or study. History is another. Like, what's the timeline here? So that comes naturally to some people, definitely not me. So yeah, hopefully that'll be encouraging to you to know that, yeah, I have to look that stuff up as well. I don't remember the timelines very well. So, any other questions?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just reading the history.
Chad's over here. Oh, this is really interesting. Let's click on this link.
Yeah.
It actually is interesting, and so hopefully you'll benefit and be blessed by that study, because it is always, one of the wonderful things about that question, but also just the what gives rise to that question is the fact that we're talking about real history here, and the Book of Esther really presses that on us. It reminds us that this is not a fairy tale. It's not just some sort of mythical story that was told and retold. It actually is a real story set in a real setting in history. I mean, Xerxes is a man that history records and talks about his kingdom and talks about his life. And this is a story within that very historical kingdom and king and time frame and everything. And so hopefully it's a good encouragement to all of us to remember we're not just talking about legends here.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about sort of mythical heroes or something. We're talking about real people and real historical settings. And so it is actually interesting. Anytime you start reading about, it's not just the Book of Esther, anytime you start reading about the history or time frame or geography surrounding the minor prophets or the major prophets or King David or whatever, it's very interesting to just learn more. So even though history doesn't come naturally to me, it is something that certainly piques your interest once you start thinking about it a little bit more. So I was just reading this morning, actually, in my just personal devotion time. I was reading in the Gospel of John, and it was striking to me that John actually goes out of his way to correct a historical error already that had crept into the church. So it's when Jesus is talking to Peter and tells Peter how he's going to die. Basically, he doesn't say it in those words, but he says, when you're old, they're going to take you where you don't want to go, and so on. And it says specifically referring to how Peter would die. And then John says, basically like, well, what about me? And Jesus says to him, what does it matter to you? That's, your life is a different story. And already interesting, because presumably this was a misunderstanding that arose among the apostles, because this is Jesus talking to the apostles. But they apparently misunderstood what Jesus said, and the legend had already started to grow that John would never die. That they were thinking, oh, Jesus told John that he would never die. And John, writing the Gospel of John, says, now this myth has started, but this is not what Jesus actually said. What Jesus actually said is what is it to you if I, do this or this or whatever. And so it's very interesting to me how careful the Gospel writers are actually to keep the history accurate. Like, it would be great to, just feed that legend if you're the Apostle John, like, yeah, I'm amazing. Jesus said all this stuff about me. But instead, John's like, no, let me correct this little legend that has started apparently from some of the apostles, and has started circulating around. Jesus never said I was going to not die. This is what he actually said. So it's just striking to me how careful historians all the scripture writers are. They're never just telling a story to make a good story. They're always very cautious and careful to say, no, this is what actually happened. So anyway, just a little historical thought. I'd just been thinking about that this morning from my devotional. I was struck by the fact that John goes out of his way to be like, let me just clarify some myths and misunderstandings, some gossip that's out there, and write specifically to make sure that they get it right. So.
Yeah. Another history question.
Okay.
Daniel 6:1 says, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom. Esther 1:1 says, the Xerxes who ruled over the 127 provinces. So do you think Darius has 120 provinces?
I just don't know. Yeah. I have not been studying Daniel. I've been studying Esther. So even though, yes, I agree, they're very closely related in time, they're very closely related in a lot of the themes, which is to encourage Israel in captivity, that God has not forgotten them. And so they're very similar in their sort of overarching goal, but they're still very different, obviously, also. So I haven't been studying Daniel, and I wouldn't try to guess. I wouldn't try to guess it and how exactly it compares in things to Esther. But no, it's a great point and a good question.
We can confirm that Xerxes was the son of Darius.
There you go. So, any other questions?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, happy Thanksgiving to you all, and if we don't have questions, we don't have much to talk about. So, but I do hope that the Lord will bless you, and that maybe, I've found that in my life, one of the number one ways of overcoming not just discouragement but idolatry is Thanksgiving. When you're a grateful heart naturally more easily overcomes covetousness, idolatry, all those things, because a grateful heart is already saying, look at what God has done for me. Look at what I already have. Look at what, who I am in Jesus. And so this is a great topic to be talking about and thinking about on Thanksgiving weekend, because I think we tend to skip over Thanksgiving a lot of times. And that whether it's in the States or in Canada, I'm sure the tendency is the same, because it's a lot easier to be about Christmas, where you get gifts and it's a bigger party and all those kind of things. And the story is a bit more.
Yeah, I think maybe not skipped over as much as Thanksgiving becomes more about the meal than about the actual giving thanks.
Yes, right. Yeah, just like Christmas can become about the gifts.
Yeah.
And so it's a great occasion to just stop with your family during this time, whether you have a big meal or whether whether you eat off paper plates, whatever you do. But whatever you're doing, to stop with your family and just say, let's give thanks, and part of our giving thanks, let's be sure we give thanks for Jesus Christ and the fact that in Him we have everything we need. And so we can lay all our idols and all our worries about the future and all our concerns and anything that's making us miserable, we can put all that at the feet of Jesus and know that He cares for us. So I pray that that'll be your Thanksgiving weekend experience, and that you'll have a wonderful time with family, loved ones, whoever you're with. Anything else? All right. All right, God bless.
Oh, wait. It's another. Haman was an Agagite, and Saul didn't kill Agag as told by God. So do you think because of disobedience of Saul, the future generations suffered? We have to come back.
Yeah, we'll hit that one later.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.